question I'm thinking about is this, that Srila Prabhupada's whole endeavor and focus, how much endeavor was to present Krishna consciousness purely, not Kaika but Dharma. They wanted to do Srimad Bhagavatam. Still, after a few years, we see, after 70 years, he started to speak more and more about Varnashram Dharma.
In Prabhupada's own preachings.
Right, Prabhupada's own preachings.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow giving more emphasis than I can see he gave in the beginning. Talking about how devotees asking Srila Prabhupada, well, aren't we transcendental to it? And Prabhupada saying, are we? And if they're Vaishnavas, why are they falling down?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow wanting to establish a foundation, helping people to attain more peace of mind and more favorable position to engage in Krishna consciousness. It seems from what I've been reading from Prabhupada, what's in my mind is how to understand this too. It's very broad.
I have my own observations and take on that, which also necessarily requires to address two aspects of a devotee's life, or let's say a preacher's life, particularly. If someone deems himself a preacher, then he has a prime responsibility, and then he has, let's not say secondary, but a corollary responsibility. The first and foremost responsibility of any preacher is to himself be fully self-realized, in order to be fully empowered to infuse bhakti shakti in the hearts of the people that he's associating with or endeavoring to preach to. If that is lacking, then we question whether or not we are Vaishnavas. It is not just that someone hears a little philosophy and then he parrots the philosophy at a college or wherever, that is the actual substance which impresses anyone. You may be able to bamboozle someone intellectually, but you may not succeed in actually inculcating the essence of prema to the heart of that person in order to generate in him genuine pure devotional shraddha. Varnashram is meant for those who are not having pure devotional shraddha. That means pure devotional shraddha, not bhav, not prema, but pure devotional shraddha.
Which is like
is the basis of pure devotion. Because in the writings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he delineates rather scientifically distinction between pure devotional shraddha, chaya shraddha abhas, and pratibimba shraddha abhas. There's semblance of shraddha, which many devotees may think is actual shraddha, but it's actually not pure devotional shraddha. Pure devotional shraddha, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is synonymous with Sharanagati. And Sharanagati begins with accepting those things which are favorable for the cultivation of Uttama Bhakti. Anyabhilasita shunyam, jnana karmadhyanabritam. And what is it? The main focal point of a devotee's life is anukulena krishnanushilanam. So, to accept the sarup lakshana of pure devotion is the most essential. The sarup lakshana is anukulena krishnanushilanam. That is to be accepted, and to reject those things which are unfavorable. What does that mean? Anyavilasita shunyam jnana karmadhyanabritam. So, to become fixed up in Uttama Bhakti in order to actually realize the purport of Bhagavad, or the import of Bhagavad Dharma, the devotee has to actually be considerably focused. And what does that mean? Shraddha, Shabde, Vishwas, Sudridha, Nishchoy, Sudridha, Dridha Vrat, Yesham Tantakata Papam, Jananam, Punyakarmanam, Yedvan Virmohan Nirmukta, Bhajante Mam, Dridha Vrata, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, Itantascha, Dridha Vrata. So that firm determination, and not just any Dridha Vrata, but Sudridha Vrata. Sudridha Nishchoy. Krishna Bhakti Koile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. That all my necessities of life, my prime necessities, most important necessities, will be fulfilled simply by doing Krishna Bhakti. And Krishna Bhakti means Shuddha Bhakti, not Mishra Bhakti. So we need to recognize in our own life that anything other than preaching the principles of pure devotional service is subsidiary. It is not the essence. These are conditional dharmas. Many devotees have become bewildered by these instructions of Srila Prabhupada, thinking that the establishment of Varnashram Dharma is of utmost importance. But actually, the establishment of Varnashram Dharma was mostly, if you go through all of the recordings of Srila Prabhupada's conversations, etc., with religionists and scientists, economists, and whatnot, you'll hear how he again and again harps on the necessity for there to be a head on human society, and that others will be able to function properly only if there's a head to guide them, like that. Right. And the whole idea of his preaching against classless society or communism, which is not classless, but basically just Sudra society, with a few administrators reaping at the expense of everyone else, which proves that the concept is a virtual impossibility. So in this way, Prabhupada mostly focused his preaching to such kinds of people in the direction of, you could say, sub-religious principles. Because Varnashram is a sub-religious principle. It's not a real religious principle. And even here in Vrindavan, there's some morning walks where Prabhupada's discussing Varnashram College and his idea of instituting Varnashram. His main purpose that I can understand, although as you pointed out, he said if they're Vaishnava, then why are they falling down? But his main purpose was to set an example in the microcosm for the benefit of the macrocosm. That was his main intention. Of course, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, as far as I remember, he mentions that Varnashram is only necessary. It is not necessary, but it is only necessary to the extent that there are residues of the bodily conception of life. So there are those amongst us in the society of devotees who are determined to remain attached to their bodily conception of life. And they will determinately attach themselves to the upadi of being a brahmachari, or the upadi of being a sannyasi, parading around with their masquerade costumes on, identifying with the particular role that they're endeavoring to model for the benefit of others. But many of them, in spite of the fact that they were role modeling as sannyasis, or good little brahmacharis, or grihastas with redoubled preaching strength, and all these things, they fell away. It's not that Prabhupada didn't introduce Varnashram in the sense that certain individuals were accepting positions in relationship to the Krishna conscious society in the various ashrams practically from the very onset. Maybe not in the very beginning, but like by the time I joined in 1973, That was 7 years after he registered the society in New York. Or let's say 7 years after his preaching actually took off. But by the time, and long before that, even several years before that at least, 68, there was the idea amongst the devotees of grihastas, brahmacharis, sannyasis. So they had their safety net to fall back on in terms of human existence. Varnashram is the beginning of human life. But did that stop them from falling down? You understand my point? Just the fact that someone is pigeonholed as a brahmachari or grihastha or a vanaprastha or sannyasi, that doesn't guarantee that he's not going to become distracted from his pursuit of the ultimate goal of life. And as a matter of fact, my personal observation is, over the years, seeing how so many of them fell away in spite of the fact that they were big, this, that, or the other, varnashram-wise, I have to candidly criticize that the reason why they fell down is because they were not sufficiently encouraged to pursue the parodharma. Because they were already distracted, thinking that they had to involve themselves with conditional dharmas more than what was perhaps actually required, and that thereby losing valuable time. In other words, the preaching perhaps didn't sufficiently impress upon them the need to progress. I'm not saying Prabhupada's preaching, although what others preached was stemming from what Prabhupada was preaching. But anyone who wants to glean the essence of Krishna consciousness could do so by hearing from Srila Prabhupada. But many of the leaders in our movement became absorbed in conditional pursuits in terms of their idea that we have to set up varnashram within our society. We have to somehow or other, although Prabhupada says this is a virtual impossibility, although quite necessary to rectify the ills of human society, reestablish varnashram in the context of the present demoniac leadership infrastructure of so-called civilization. It is not possible. Prabhupada said clearly that it was not possible. And he also offered the solution. I say that if it's a solution for the macrocosm, then it's also a solution for the microcosm. It should be seen as the solution for the microcosm even before thinking to apply it to the macrocosm. And that is to increase the piety, to force the people to become pious, because it's for the people and by the people. The government for the people, by the people, means that because the people are not pious, a bunch of small dogs, animals, getting together and electing one big animal and glorifying him until they're ready to pull him off the throne. The blue jackal syndrome. But how to make them pious? How to increase their spiritual intelligence so that they can see things in proper perspective, so that they can see the distinction between the pure devotional ideal or the Vedic ideal and the present demoniac, mundane wrangling, exploitative type of government that is going on now. So Prabhupada told that the solution to the problem is to perform mass Harinam Sankirtan and book distribution. But he specifically mentioned mass Harinam Sankirtan all over the world, because the atmosphere, which is surcharged with the influence of the holy name, the sound of the holy name, and even the ethereal element in the atmosphere purified, so much so that even after the Sankirtan party has gone back to the temple, still that atmosphere is so pure that if people enter into that atmosphere where the Sankirtan party was, they become purified of sinful reactions, and they gain piety. And not just any kind of piety. Bhaktyam Mukhe Sukriti. So then they become more and more eligible to get Shraddha, even pure devotional Shraddha, or at least Shraddha Bhas, which is somehow connected with Krishna consciousness, then it's possible for them to recognize the need for superior Krishna conscious leadership in human society. And then by the people voting the God conscious leadership into office for the people. So the idea is that the devotees, hearing that Prabhupada had this desire to re-implement Varnashram in human society, and in order to accomplish that, to set up little Varnashram communities so as to pose as an example for the rest of the world to follow, in their confusion about that, they became, let's say, neglectful of the basic elementary process that Srila Prabhupada instructed by which that could ever be possible. And that's to perform Harinam Sankirtan. So all over the movement, especially after Prabhupada left, Harinam Sankirtan waned like anything, practically to the point where no one goes out on Harinam Sankirtan except for maybe in a couple places in the world. But compared to the way it was when Prabhupada was here, where devotees were going out daily on Harinam Sankirtan and having Maha Harinam Sankirtan processions in the thick of it on Friday or Saturday, on the weekends. In other words, the cart was put before the horse. It's much harder for a horse to push a cart than it is for a horse to draw a cart. So the horse should go before the cart. Unless we become sufficiently purified from our attachments to all upadis, sarva upadi vinirmuktam, including the conceptions of oneself, the bodily conception which would make it necessary for you to think in terms of entertaining Varnashram Dharma, even in the slightest. Unless we become purified of all these upadis, then we're not going to be able to be invested with the Shakti, the spiritual realization, the cognizance of who we really are. On the spiritual platform, Sagunan Samatitaitan Brahmabhuyaya Kalpate. How? Not by practicing Varnashram duties and all these things, but by Bhakti Yogena Sevate. Mamcha Yogyabhicharina Bhakti Yogena Sevate. Means without deviating from that principle, then it's possible Sagunan Samatitaitan. In other words, there's no solution to anyone's problems. Varnashram is not the solution to anyone's problems. It will never be the solution to the soul's problems. Varnashram is only a stepping stone to the extent that Varnashram actually fosters Shuddha Bhakti. If the Shuddha Bhakti principles are not being followed, then Varnashram is certainly an anartha. Whether Varnashram or no Varnashram, the real substance has to be there for anything to be viable and real. And in Kali Yuga, I hate to sound like a fanatic. I don't want people to brand me as being some kind of an old-timer, old-fashioned. But I dare say that Kali Yuga has hardly started. And for the whole Kali Yuga, 432,000 years of Kali Yuga, for the whole Kali Yuga, not just for the first 4,500 years, taking it up to about the time when Lord Chaitanya and his associates were chanting and dancing at Srivas Sangam and busting out and taking it to the streets. Not just for a few thousand years. Not just for a few hundred years. How many hundreds of years has it been since Lord Chaitanya appeared to inaugurate it? What is it? Harinam Sankirtan, the Yuga-Dharma, which is the Yuga-Dharma for the whole Yuga, please. And not just for the whole Yuga, but for every living entity who's appearing on Earth, particularly on Earth, because in other planetary systems the ages are not effective. But on this earthly planet, there's such a thing as Kali Yuga. There's such a thing as Treta Yuga. There's such a thing as Dwapara Yuga. There's such a thing as Satya Yuga. So in Kali Yuga, which is applicable, the Yuga cycle is applicable to this Earth planet, when living entities appear on Earth planet in Kali Yuga, it is those living entities who have made their appearance during the Kali Yuga, when the Yuga-Dharma is effective, most effective, who have to take advantage of performing the Yuga-Dharma. Just like everybody's, not everybody, but a large contingency of devotees. They harp on cow protection, because Prabhupada harped on cow protection also. How many times we heard how Prabhupada is telling how the cow gives milk, and milk gives finer brain substance for understanding subtle spiritual. What's subtle? It's not so subtle. As a matter of fact, it's blatantly obvious in that it's staring us in the face. Finer brain substances means what? Milk of the cow gives finer brain substances for understanding. Understanding means understanding what? Finer brain substances means sumetasa. Understanding means Yuga-Dharma Sankirtana Prayar Yajantihi sumetasa. So then we have to see. In Kali Yuga, it is not possible to satisfy Krishna without satisfying the Kali Yuga Jagya Purush, who happens to be Lord Chaitanya, who is satisfied how? By the performance of the Yuga-Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan. So we can sit in armchair philosophize about Varnashram all we want and think that we're doing something wonderful in the matter of setting up our little microcosm among the devotees. But I say to hell with Varnashram Dharma. There's no time for cultivating Varnashram Dharma. People who think there is time for cultivating Varnashram Dharma simply have not understood the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And for them, maybe they can busy themselves with cultivating Varnashram Dharma. But for someone who's actually serious about pursuing the path of Shuddha Bhakti, who's actually understood the philosophy, he realizes that this human form of life is very short. And if I have to get from A to Z in this one lifetime, it's going to take a focused, single-minded intelligence. Ekeha Kurunandana, Krishna says. Ekeha, one-pointed. And for those who have other things than Bahushaka, many branches, this conditional dharma, that conditional dharma, whatever. But for someone who wants to actually achieve the terrace of prema, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he should concern himself with the regulative principles of Varnashram Dharma as little as possible, and focus his life's energies on performing the Yuga-Dharma, by which you can hope to get anywhere. And Yuga-Dharma means Paro-Dharma, which is fostering Parabhakti, or Raganuga Bhakti, because that's what Mahaprabhu came to give by his inaugurating the Sankirtan movement. The Sankirtan movement is a movement meant to spread Braja Prema, open the storehouse of Braja Bhakti, and distribute Braja Bhakti to the most fallen conditioned souls. So that has to be taken into consideration. Sankirtan Jagya is not just anything, any kind of Sankirtan. First of all, it's Harinam Sankirtan, and it's not just any kind of Harinam Sankirtan. The main Sankirtan is the Sankirtan of the Mahamantra, because Mahamantra is the Tarak Brahma Kirtan mantra for this age of Kali. There were other mantras which were the Tarak Brahma Kirtan mantras for other ages. But this Hare Krishna Mahamantra happens to be a Radha Krishna Yugal, Vipralambamayi Radha Krishna Yugal mantra. The Nimbarkas have Radhe Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radhe, 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 Sham, Radhe, Sham, 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 Radhe, Radhe. This is also Radha Krishna Yugal mantra, but it is Sambhogmaya. Ours is Vipralambamaya, which leads to Braja. The perfection, or you can say the fruit, according to Dhyan Chandra in Sri Sri Gaur Govinda Archan Smaran Padati, he says, what is the fruit of chanting the Mahamantra? And that is the attainment of Braja Dham. So Mahamantra Sankirtan is for the purpose of augmenting Rag Bhakti, spontaneous devotion, following in the footsteps of the Brajvasis, whose devotion is immaculate. It is completely pure from any contamination of Aishwarya Gyan or mundane karmas or any such things. Contamination with the desires for self-satisfactions that you find in other realms, which are attained by conditional bhakti. Our Guru Parampara and Srila Prabhupada also, he very clearly preached, stressing unconditional devotion, unalloyed devotion. That means Kevala Bhakti. So that's our real legacy. When Prabhupada said that half his work was done, so then everyone goes, huh? What's the other half that was not done? So then they say half of his work was done. But what was his work? It was to establish the Krishna consciousness movement. It was to establish the Sankirtan movement. Half of his work was done. But we seem to forget that he said that we should maintain what he's done. Not just turn toward the 50% which was not done, which some people foolishly have opted to do. They think that, well, what Prabhupada did, he already did. That's already done. Now we have to focus on what he didn't do in order to accomplish the 50%. And what was the 50%? He expressed that the 50% was to establish Varnashram Dharma in the world. But we've already discussed how Prabhupada said it could be done. It could be done by performing Harinam Sankirtan. Nonsense. Not by going around trying to convince demons that they should be engaged in Varnashram Dharma. That's hardly. You establish Varnashram Dharma by replacing the leadership. As long as the leaders are creating a consumer society and trying to keep everyone in ignorance so that they can sell them their unnecessary so-called necessities. You understand? So that they can bleed Rakshashas, living off the blood of human society. As long as that's going on, you can't even begin to think in terms of establishing Varnashram Dharma. So where's the question of fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's 50%? Unless we actually seriously take the formula that he advocated for accomplishing that. And that's to put the horse before the cart and do your Harinam Sankirtan. Get absorbed in Harinam Sankirtan, by which you yourself will be able to get the higher taste so that you can give up the lower taste, so that you won't have to concern yourself with thinking in terms of this upadi or that upadi. You'll actually be above the influence of the three modes of material nature. You'll actually be above Varnashram as a pure Vaishnava because you have Ruchi, Harinam Ruchi, Shuddhanam Ruchi. You don't get Shuddhanam Ruchi by not doing Harinam Sankirtan, please. You understand my point? Does it make sense to you?
Very good. Amazing.
Otherwise it's just show bottle.
You forgot the substance.
Yeah, you forget what's the actual medicine, the actual nourishment. It's a big mistake. Misled. Krishna consciousness movement has been grossly misled. Either by ignorant people, shallow people, superficial type of people who just can't really get to the essence of what the whole thing's supposed to be all about, or by diabolical people who are purposely, conscientiously trying to undermine the progress of the Krishna consciousness movement from within. Don't think that that can't be going on. But at least it shouldn't go on in our individual lives. If we want to become empowered, then we have to first of all recognize what is the truth, so that we can represent the truth, represent. If we don't even recognize, then how are we going to represent the Sampradaya? The Sampradaya is not a bunch of baboons screwing things up for the spiritual master. Sampradaya means people who are actually absorbed in what the Sampradaya is teaching. And what the Sampradaya is teaching means the whole gamut of teachings. Varnashram is a very insignificant aspect of the Sampradaya's teachings.
People all overemphasizing this Varnashram is just reflective of their own lack of Shraddha.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Of course, Prabhupada harped on Varnashram at a certain point, as you mentioned, and that didn't indicate his lack of Shraddha. But for the most part, devotees who were focusing on that, just like for some time there was this, what was it called? Social development. This is not the International Society for Social Development, please. It's not the International Society for Varnashram Dharma. It's the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Or another way you can say it, it's not Lord Chaitanya's social development movement. It's not his Varnashram movement. It's not his cow protection movement. It's not his baby making movement. It's not his international meat mart movement, as we see around the Vrindavan Yatra time and again. It's not really even Lord Chaitanya's book distribution movement. book distribution is Sankirtan in that it promotes the Yuga-Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan. The essence of all the Shastras is the chanting of the holy name. That's the essential message of all the scriptures. The scriptures were made for Kali Yuga rejects like us who have short memories. They were written down. In previous yugas, they didn't need to write it down. There may be one or two, and they might have written things down, but practically all the brahmacharis were Shrutidhar. They could remember. Most of us brahmacharis in Kali Yuga have memories like us. There's a few good ones, but you can hardly think that Vyasadeva wrote down the literatures for the people of Kali Yuga without considering the necessity of promoting the currently manifest Yuga-Dharma. It's not that Vyasadeva didn't know what the Yuga-Dharma was going to be.
That's the criteria. Someone understands the book, that's what he does. Nama-Sankirtana.
You'll see him engaging in the Yuga-Dharma. And if for some reason he can't directly engage in Nama-Sankirtana, then at least he can distribute a few books to encourage other people to come forward to join Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement so that they can have the opportunity to engage in the Yuga-Dharma. I really don't call just shuffling your feet around Mangalarti, hardly even getting off the ground and mumbling a few mantras. How much Hare Krishna Mahamantra Kirtan is done during the Mangalarti or the Guru Puja Kirtan anyway. In most Western temples, nobody comes back for the Sandhya Arti in the evening. They're either out there making money or distributing books or whatever they're doing, but they're not coming to the temple. So basically all you got is 2 kirtans in the morning program for about 25 minutes each. And that's all of your life's energies that you're going to offer for the performance of Yuga-Dharma. And everything else it better be somehow or another connected, supporting temple management. But what's temple management? What's the meaning of temple management? If the manager doesn't recognize that the temple is supposed to be a place where people congregate to perform congregational chanting of the holy names. Sweeping the floor. Why? So there's a clean place to come perform Nama-Sankirtana. Worshipping the deity. Why? We're feeding the deity nicely, decorating him nicely, making sure that the deity is not inconvenienced, that at least he's a little comfortable. Why? So that he'll stay with us, to place his favorable glances on our performances of Yuga-Dharma Nama-Sankirtana.
That's the pivot of everything.
Because Harinam Sankirtana is the Yuga-Dharma. Any other service which doesn't recognize its subordination to the Yuga-Dharma can hardly be called service, rather it's an anartha.
Amazing. In the name of service, it's getting distracted.
Yes, exactly.
So the best thing I can do is to just work to increase my own focus on Nama-Sankirtana.
Yeah, and encourage other people. And see, the thing is, and that's one thing that our movement is greatly lacking, is the higher taste, which makes people happy. It's because they're not getting a higher taste that they're not happy. And because they're not happy, there's so much bickering, so much institutional and interinstitutional quarrel and strife, because they're not getting the higher taste. So they prefer to busy themselves with all these cyber wars and all this kind of garbage, which is supposedly so important to philosophically battle each other. Why not philosophically try to understand that if we're not performing the Yuga-Dharma, then we're missing the point, and actually surrender, Sharanagati, on the basis of faith in the purposes of Lord Chaitanya's advent, to inaugurate the Sankirtan movement of the holy name. It's not such a difficult thing to understand. If anyone has read any of Srila Prabhupada's books.
Probably people are not reading Prabhupada's books now.
Maybe. They may not be reading Prabhupada's books. Even people who supposedly did read Prabhupada's books, but they saw what they wanted to see.
Right.
They didn't actually read with the necessary receptivity of a disciple. 2 things are important. There's the potent guru and the receptive disciple. It's filtering through They have their own inbuilt knowledge filters. They don't have the adhikar, so they don't recognize things. Adhikar begins with pure devotional shraddha. Which means that likely if they didn't have the adhikar in the beginning when they started reading the books, then it's due to the fact that many of them are coming into the fold of Sadguru's association for the first time. So they're chanting Aparad Nam. They're not even on the platform of... So how much can they see? How much are their clouds of illusion dissipating? They didn't have sufficient previous association in previous lifetimes. So they're kind of like starting on square one. So you can't really blame them. They're on the progressive path. In the next lifetime, they'll get a better situation and maybe have more sumedha saha to understand the point. So due to lack of sufficient accumulation of Bhakti-mukhi Sakriti from previous lifetimes, their shraddha is weak.
Coming back to the same point of the main Svarupa, I would say, the responsibility of a preacher is to practice and inculcate pure shraddha, pure devotional service, and preach pure devotional service to others.
According to Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Shikshamrita, he says that this Jiva Doya, Nam Ruchi, Jiva Doya, and Vaishnav Seva. These three things are important. Nam Ruchi is absolutely required. Jiva Doya can be manifest on three levels. But without having Nam Ruchi, one could hardly be actually doing Jiva Doya. Nam Ruchi means Shuddha Nam Ruchi. That's real Ruchi. So when Shuddha Nam Ruchi is there, when one is chanting the Shuddha Nam, you can't have Shuddha Nam Ruchi unless you're chanting Shuddha Nam.
Right.
So if someone is chanting Shuddha Nam, then his chanting can actually do good to others. If someone is chanting Abhas Nam, then you do a semblance of good to others, please. If someone is chanting Aparad Nam, you hardly do any good for others at all. By Aparad Nam, you can fill their bellies. Even Aparad Nam will make it rain and make grains grow and solve people's chapati problems. You will get bhukti, filled belly, gratified palate by the offended name. So you're doing that kind of semblance of good. And the other kind of semblance of good is that you're freeing the people who hear the Abhas Nam, the Abhas or Vaishnava Abhas would be chanting, those who have Abhas Nam, so-called Ruchi. Then the result of the Abhas Nam chanting would be that you're freeing them from sinful reactions so that they gradually become elevated from the Tamagun and Rajagun to the Sattvagun. And as they're freed from sinful reactions, to the extent that they're situated in the Sattvagun, to that extent knowledge can be illuminated and they can begin to understand the difference between matter and spirit. But they don't get bhakti. The only real good anyone can do for anyone is to infuse bhakti into their hearts by chanting Shuddha Nam. So those who are chanting Shuddha Nam are on three levels. And as such, corresponding to those three levels, there are three levels of Jiva Doya. The devotee at the stage of Ruchi, Shuddha Nam Ruchi, he's chanting Shuddha Nam. He's considered as a sadhaka. He's not a siddha. He's still a sadhaka. But because he's chanting the pure name, he can plant the seed of pure devotional shraddha within the heart of an ordinary man and gradually help him to come to the platform of Ruchi by doing an Nartana Vritti, etc. But on a higher level are those who are actually siddha, who attain the Bhava platform. And they can immediately generate Nam Ruchi within the heart of an ordinary man. In other words, they can purify that soul considerably by the power of their chanting and gradually bring them up to his position. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that those who are actually Premika Vaishnavas, their power is not limited and they can immediately just by glancing, just by good wishes, or just by vacha, means pronouncing benediction upon someone. They can immediately bring him to the prema platform. So, at least we should be, if we want to do any good for anyone, at least we have to be on the platform of chanting Shuddhanam as pure devotee sadhakas. So green mango. It may not be ripe mango, but at least green mango. At least mango.
Work in progress.
See, the real thing. The ends and the means have to be the same. If you're not engaged in pure devotional practices, you're not going to perfect those pure devotional practices to come to the position of pure devotion in perfection. It's a very simple thing. If you're engaging in bhakti avas on the basis of shraddha avas, then you're not going to come to the platform of genuine rati. You're going to come to the position of rati avas. So then how important it is, we have very few years to accomplish anything. We have to really focus on doing whatever is required to actually get Nam Ruchi, so that we can even hope to begin to do the real Jiva-Daya. Everyone is harping on para upakara, para upakara, para upakara. Gosti Anandi, para upakara. But there's no para upakara unless there's para bhakti. And para bhakti means rag bhakti. There may be upakara, doing something to others. But para upakara actually means to act as an agent of the predecessor acharyas in disciplic succession, to give the people what the sampradaya is actually set up to give them.
Be a faithful link.
Be a transparent vaya media. Transparent vaya media means that you have the eligibility or the adhikar, the qualification to allow the actual message to come through without putting your little knowledge filter on it. Which means keeping people in the dark as to what is the actual siddhanta of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So at least we have to help people to come to the position of understanding what is the prayojan, the goal. There's no need of understanding the Abhideya Tattva unless you've already ascertained what is the goal. Yeah. You see my point? So devotees have to become well acquainted, well versed. If they want to actually be preachers, they have to themselves be well acquainted with the gamut of Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, both in theory and in realization. In other words, there's no substitute for becoming a realized soul. So our first business, putting the horse before the cart in our own lives, our first business is to become fully self-realized souls. At least on the Ruchi platform, it's possible to recognize our natural, intrinsic spiritual inclination toward a particular rasa and be engaged in the pursuit of that bhav. Without pursuing that bhav, how do you expect you're going to get there? You have to know where you're going in order to get there. It doesn't just automatically happen. Know where you're going and practice accordingly. Otherwise, there's no question of being able to suss out what is favorable, what is unfavorable, because one man's food is another man's poison.
You don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yeah. To nowhere.
Right.
So we have to be a little thoughtful that what are we doing with our human form of life? Our most important duty to the Guru Parampara is to become fully self-realized so that we can have the fitness to help others become fully self-realized. Because what is the use, what is the meaning of, okay, it's a very nice movement for having ample facility for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And there's enough of that going on. Why should I come to this movement for eating, sleeping, mating, defending? I was doing fine eating, sleeping, mating, defending out there in the material world. I came to this movement to get something solid, something real, to solve my spiritual dilemma in the matter of my not being able to ascertain the purpose of my life.
the purpose of my existence, my being in anxiety on account of not knowing who I am, my abject forgetfulness of Krishna. And remembrance of Krishna doesn't mean that you keep a little Krishna on the side over here on the mantle, in the other corner you have a big fat color TV. Jai Jagadisha Hari. That's not remembering Krishna. It may be a semblance of remembering Krishna, but really remembering Krishna. Remembering Krishna means samadhi. That's real remembrance. And work means working toward the accomplishment of samadhi. Not just doing any damn thing, working, like a workaholic. Yeah. Samadhi means complete absorption. And not just practical samadhi in the sense of absorbing the external body and Krishna sense objects, but absorbing the mind. Complete absorption is not complete unless the mind, the intellect, the consciousness, the whole lock, stock, and barrel taken together is absorbed in Krishna. Samadhi now, work later. The real work. Jiva-doya, the real Jiva-doya, not the semblance of Jiva-doya. Distribute a few books so that they actually get the chance to hear Srila Prabhupada's preaching, which is coming from the self-realized platform, but when they come into the doors of the Krishna consciousness movement, you distort the image in this way and that way and another, and completely confuse them, and make them wonder whether they understood what was in the books or not. How much of that is going on? Blockheads hadn't even figured it out himself. He's trying to cram some nonsense down someone else's throat in the name of the Krishna consciousness movement, and not actually allowing them to see what is the actual Siddhanta.
Really, it's disaster.
It is disaster. It's a fiasco. It's not like that everywhere, but an awful lot of everywhere is subject to that kind of environmental condition within the context of the Krishna consciousness movement. Due to immaturity, due to miserliness, like Janakasura. Janakasura, neither he could taste the tall fruits, nor would he allow anybody else to taste the tall fruits. But our real business is to taste the tall fruits of Braja Prema and Rag Marg Bhakti Loki Korite Pracharan. Pracharan means to preach. To preach what? To preach Rag Marg Bhakti Loki to the world. Loki means to the world, to the people. Loki means to everyone, not just to the select few. You may have to judge how much an individual can handle, but the idea is that many are called and few are chosen, but that doesn't mean that because few are chosen that many should not be called. These are basic common sense, spiritual common sense is required. Then you can do real Jiva-doya and fulfill Lord Chaitanya's mission. His mission is to elevate people to the platform of Rag Bhakti. That's why he came to this world. And that's what the Goswamis of Vrindavan also. That's what their representatives also. But instead we're satisfied to preach Varnashram Dharma. Ourselves missing the point, thinking that that's for another lifetime or something. And disallowing others. Janakasura syndrome in the heart of another Kali Yuga reject, passing himself off as some kind of a spiritual mentor.
That's what Prabhupada meant all this when he said it's boil the milk.
Yes, exactly. Boil the milk. Very deeply understand the philosophy from all angles of vision. Then focus on the conclusion and help others to get that focus. That's preaching. Not just satisfied with preaching the rudimentaries, but to help others to get a higher taste, to inspire them to pursue the goal. That's preaching. And to take to the process by which they can most easily attain the goal, which is Nama-Sankirtana, coupled with Bhagavad Shravan Kirtan, Prasad distribution. Book distribution means Bhagavad Shravan Kirtan. 5 angas, most important. Dambas, Bhagavad Shravan Kirtan,
Nama-Sankirtana, Srimurti Seva, and Sadhu Sanga. But real Sadhu Sanga. Not just any damn thing that wears Kandimala and Tilak. Kali Chela.
That type of Sangha, they were doomed to get this right. By all this.
Yeah, but if you can't find it, you can find it. You can find it in the books. Everyone has the right to exercise his own intelligence. And someone who's coming under the sway of someone who thinks that he has to keep everyone under his thumb means that he's too much of a wimp to use his own intelligence, unduly surrendering his so-called intelligence to someone else without actually weighing the consequences. But anyone who has a little intelligence certainly is rightful in his exercise of his intelligence in ascertaining the actual essence of the scriptures that he's reading. It's not so difficult. Even before someone takes initiation, it's not impossible to do considerable anartha nivritti. Anartha nivritti is not just had by not doing bhajan, please. I mean, a certain amount of it can be done without doing much bhajan. You can just stomp your foot down and refuse to eat meat anymore, even if you didn't do much bhajan. But anyway.
I was thinking in terms of this knowledge filters you mentioned before. Not having the proper adhikar.
Yeah.
Then they really got the book in front of them. They'll just see what they want to see.
Exactly.
Unless somebody comes and inculcates in them.
And even then, they have to be willing to accept it.
Right.
And live by it in order to actually realize the value of the thing. You have to have enough faith. It's not, someone can come along and force open your eyes, but if you want to be an owl, as soon as he's gone somewhere else, then immediately your eyes are closed again, back into your dream world. A couple of ideas, at least.
Possibly.
Were you expecting that answer? Probably.
I was feeling that was the thing, deep down.
Yeah.
That's going to firmly confirm.
Yeah.
Process.
Anyway, that's my angle on it.
I can see any other taking account what the Siddhanta of the Shastra and Sampradaya definitely makes sense when you look at the proper set completely.
Yeah.
You can construe that way.
One boy asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, I read in your books that it's possible for a man in Vedic society to have more than one wife. And Prabhupada answered, oh, is that what you're reading my books for? I always love that anecdote. I think it was a classic example. And, similarly so many other things.
Right.
You can find so many things, but you can also find the essence. So there's two kinds of devotees. There's Saragrahi. Sara means essence, Grahi means drinking. And then there's Varavahi, ass-like devotees carrying around heaps and piles of anarthas.
Right.
Two kinds of devotees. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommends that we should, if we aren't already, we should become Saragrahi. And we should encourage others to also become Saragrahi. That will help to improve the situation.
Right.
Yeah, the more essence drinkers are around us, the better quality sadhu sangha we're going to have. Otherwise it's sadhu sangha vas, not real sadhu sangha. Real sadhu sangha means real sadhu, and real sadhu means pure devotee. Not that all of my disciples are pure devotees. Means any damn fool who supposedly took some kind of farcical initiation from Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee. It means all of my disciples. So what constitutes disciple, please? Then we'll understand what is pure devotee. It's funny how people misconstrue things. All of my disciples are pure devotees. Who's so audacious as to claim to actually be a disciple? I've been struggling for the last 35 years practically to
try to become even some kind of a disciple. And a real disciple is an accomplished disciple. Not just blathering babes in the woods. So Sadhu Sangha means associating with real pure devotees. At least the lower order of pure devotees. Sadhaka, who is actually chanting Shuddhanam, who has profound taste for pure devotional practices, governed by Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. At least that. Because after all, life is very short. To be honest with you, although it may sound sacrilegious, personally I could give a damn whether Varnashram ever got established. What I want to see is inspired Harinam Sankirtan. My understanding is that is the panacea for all ills. Harinam Sankirtan, prasadam distribution, and philosophy for the classes. That doesn't mean Harinam Sankirtan is not for the classes. Harinam Sankirtan is for the masses, which includes the classes, please. Some people have this concept that Harinam Sankirtan, that's for the masses. Right. But we're the armchair philosophers of Krishna consciousness. That's not for us. Especially Harinam Sankirtan is for the Rasik Vaishnavas. They're the ones who will appreciate Harinam Sankirtan the most, because they're absorbed in the relishment of rasa, so they can actually understand what kirtan rasa is. Philosophers can try to anthropologically analyze the thing, but the masses, they don't know what hit them. But the real relishers of Harinam Sankirtan are the most elevated devotees. And that's what we're supposed to be trying to become. We're supposed to be trying to become Uttamadhikaris, which includes cultivating the vision of an Uttamadhikari. Then we can actually do something. Otherwise, they, the disciples, will not be able to easily advance to their ultimate goal of life under our insufficient guidance, as Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in his Nectar of Instruction book. We want to do good for others. First, do good to yourself. Dr. Heal
It seems that many people feel it's easier and convenient to so-called preach Krishna consciousness than to practice.
Than to actually practice. It's easier to pat themselves on the back, giving themselves credit for doing what Prabhupada wanted us to do. It's a preaching movement. But what constitutes preaching, please? Where does preaching start and mouthing off leave off? Preaching means to inculcate, to infuse inspiration for devotional service, bhakti, and means Shuddha bhakti, to actually impregnate the heart with bhakti shakti. That's actual preaching. If we're doing anything less than that, then we can satisfy ourselves that we're ISKCON preachers. But it's my service, Prabhu.
We're really fortunate to get to the right conclusion. We're really fortunate.
Yeah. Bhagyavan Jeev. You don't get to the right conclusion unless you actually come into the fold of the Sampradaya. But the Sampradaya doesn't mean people who are distorting the image. And it's not that all the deformities are the Sampradaya, any more than stools and dead bodies floating in the Ganga are the Ganga. We get something substantial by bathing in the Ganga, but we don't bathe in the stools. We don't bathe in the dead bodies. Those things are brushed aside in order to get the essence. So if we can't even understand the difference between the Ganga and the dead bodies and the stools floating, then how are we going to know whether or not we're actually contacting Sampradaya? The institute is like the car. The institution is like the car, and the Sampradaya is like the owner of the car. If the car becomes dysfunctional because certain constituents of its makeup no longer facilitate its purpose in conveying us from one place to another, then the owner has to junk the thing and get some other, either a new car or opt for another form of transportation.
It's the substance which has to be transported with the assistance of the institution. Sampradaya is the substance. It's the school of thought. It's the essential teachings, basically. That's what distinguishes one sampradaya from another. One luminary in a particular disciplic line may have brought to light certain teachings which will be seen as sampradaya. So therefore there's the Gaudiya Sampradaya, there's the Ramanuja Sampradaya. Ramanuja was the vehicle through which those teachings manifest to the world. So similarly, any institution or group of people or individual within the institution, constituent of the institution, can only act as a vehicle, an agent, or a instrument, in other words. Another way of saying it. To carry the essential substance teachings of the Sampradaya for the benefit of others. Therefore, the members of the institution have to be, properly aligned with the purpose of the Sampradaya. Otherwise, the thing breaks down. But it's not that Lord Chaitanya's purpose is not going to be fulfilled. He commanded, practically, that his name would be heard in every town and village all over the world. So, how often we've heard Prabhupada say, but we take it lightly, we don't consider the whole thing very deeply. Where he says that if we don't take the credit, just like the example Prabhupada gives is Krishna telling to Arjuna that they're already put to death by me. But you can only act as an instrument in the fight. So Krishna wants to give the credit to someone. It doesn't necessarily mean he wants to give the credit to us.
Right.
He has no objection to giving the credit to us if we will comply with the requirements to merit being given that credit. But if we fall short, if we're not transparent by a medium, if the image becomes distorted and Apasampradaya manifests due to Apasiddhanta coming across, then the mission of Lord Chaitanya is not going to be checked by us.
Great and bigger enough.
Yeah. Any more than the Ganges is going to be checked by a big boulder that's jutting out, blocking the way. Just like the Ganges seeks the path of least resistance, so similarly the Sampradaya seeks the path of least resistance. What is the resistance? All of our material attachments, anarthas. Whatever is obstructing the actual truth from manifesting. You understand this point?
You just have the option of choosing to be unsure.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
that's the proper or improper use of our free will. We're given the opportunity to act as a servant of Krishna. But if we want to continue to serve Maya, then so much Apasiddhanta will come babbling out of our mouthing off mouth, mouthing various bogus misrepresentations of the philosophy in the name of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So either Maya or Krishna. The choice is always there. You can either serve to represent what is actually Krishna consciousness, or you can serve to misrepresent. And you'll also be part of the perfect arrangement of Krishna. Because there's some people who require to be cheated in this lifetime in order to become frustrated enough to take it seriously in the next lifetime. So everything, perfect arrangement. You're either this part of the perfect arrangement or that part of the perfect arrangement of Krishna, but it's all Krishna's perfect arrangement. It's just a question of which aspect of that arrangement we want to serve. But by serving one aspect you get one result, and by serving another aspect you get another result. So if we want to present watered down philosophy so as to somehow or other either bolster our own self-esteem, satisfy ourselves that we're doing something wonderful, because after all, we are the next Acharya, so we also have rights to change things according to our conceptions of what we see to be pertinent time and circumstance. So therefore, we take license, liberty, to water things down. And they don't get the real thing. At least they don't get it from us. They might, by their own good fortune, run into another agent, Hari, Guru, Vaishnava, Bhagavad Gita, something, read something in another book which makes us understand that whatever's being preached over here is bogus. What's the time? Oh, 10 o'clock. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. Okay.
Well, I can't thank you enough, and I can't repay you, but you have my sincere gratitude.
Hare Krishna. Was that the only question?
Well, I have more, but...
Yeah, maybe another one.
Yeah.
You'll be around for a few days?
Yes.
How long are you staying?
I'll be in Dharma until 26th. And on the 17th, we'll go to Govardhan to attend Shachinanda Swami's Govardhan retreat.
That hasn't started already?
He started at Japa retreat at Varshana.
Oh, I see. That's what it is. Then after the Govardhan retreat, then
Then we're returning to Sweden.
to
Sweden.
Sweden. Oh.
Right. On 25th of November.
So that you can teach them all about Varnashram Dharma.
No, but I'm gonna
You can just teach them that it's only important insofar as it may help to keep peace in human society. But the real peace formula is Bhoktaram Jagatapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Sridham Sarva Bhutanam. And his friendliness toward the living entities is most dynamically and dramatically manifest in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was the most munificent avatar who came to inaugurate the process of Nama-Sankirtana as the expression of his highest friendliness toward the living entities in this age of Kali. Because that Nama-Sankirtana actually is his way of propagating Prema Dharma.
If we focus on that and all the other subsidiary things involved, that's not true.
Yeah. Everything else starts to make sense.
Okay.
When you see everything as subordinate or subservient to the Yuga-Dharma in this age of Kali.
If we put that first in place, if we're open then everything will go.
Yeah. If you do sufficient, this is another problem. Simply that it's like if I have an infection and I want to cure the infection so that I can be healthy, so I can live a normal, happy life, then it's not going to work. It's not going to happen if I only take one tablet a week or one tablet every month or two. I need to take sufficient dosage, sufficiently frequent dosage, in order for the medicine to actually have its superlative effect. Similarly, it's not enough just to lip service some token compliance with the Sankirtan principle once in a blue moon. There should be regular dosage. Of course, the temple programs, coming to see the Mangalarti of the deity, that's to force us, the force of the rule, everyone must come to Mangalarti, means that everyone must come to perform Sankirtan before the deity. But it's not like the deity is important and the Sankirtan is not important. Both are important, but of the two, the more important is the Sankirtan. The deity worship is a Yuga-Dharma for a previous Yuga. But now Kali Sankirtan has taken the helm, so to speak, taken the chair. So if someone is living in the temple and coming to the morning program, to the extent that they're putting their energy into it, if they're just coming and standing around moping, wondering why they're there, then maybe they won't get the same out of it as if they were actually enthusiastically chanting and dancing in the Sankirtan. But beyond that, above the call of duty, that's when the fun starts. That's when you actually start making some advancement. When you start spontaneously going out and performing Harinam Sankirtan, not because you're forced by the rule, but because you know that it's going to be pleasing to Lord Chaitanya, and you want to please Lord Chaitanya. You know that that's going to be pleasing to your Guru. If it's not pleasing to your Guru, then he's not your Guru.